Hi, my name is Milani Douglas, Director of Public Programs here at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Welcome to our Fresh Talk, the Art of Healing. We are so happy to have you participate in this conversation. We are having some guests that are gathered to talk about the art of healing and how that connects the dots between art and activism. Before we go on, I would like to thank, can we go to the next slide? I would like to thank our this initiative is made possible by our donors, Denise Littlefield Sobel, the DeRay Davis Family Foundation, the Rivita Foundation, and the Logan family, the Susan and Jim Schwartz Public Programs Fund, and with additional support by the Bernstein Family Foundation and the National Endowment for the Arts. We are very grateful for our sponsors and our supporters to make this possible. Women Art and Social Change is a public programs initiative where we curate conversations that provide platforms for women to advance creative ideas and solutions to some of our most pressing social issues. We are really looking at how art inspires people into action, and today's conversation is a pure example of that. I also would like to thank my staff, Amanda Vercruz, my Public Programs Manager, Lucy McCannon, Public Programs Coordinator, and our vendor StreamYard for this platform. So if you are going to participate in the conversation, please put a hashtag for Fresh Talk for Change. And we are also looking online to see if there are any comments that we can also add to the conversation as well. Thank you. So today's conversation, we are bringing together Navina Khanna, Sadeh McConnon, and Samaria King. They are doing amazing work in the fields that they are working in. Navina has dedicated over 15 years to creating more than just a sustainable world through transforming food systems. In 2014, her work was recognized with the James Beard Leadership Award. With a background in sustainable agriculture and with food justice, she has worked as an educator and a community organizer and a policy advocate, organizing across sectors of community. Today, we are having her in conversation with Samaria King. She's a farmer, an herbalist, and educator who's been working in the field of agriculture for 8 years. She is currently the farm director at Dreaming Out Loud and manages the farm at Kelly Miller, a 2-acre urban farm in Northeast DC. She's also the founder of the DC Mutual Aid Apothecary, which provides free herbal medicine and education to communities and organizers in the DMV. Today, as a multidisciplinary artist and curator, researcher, and cultural producer who studies and practices to threads together her identity as a Black mother, birth worker, and a daughter of Ethiopian immigrants. Sadeh primarily focuses on migration and intersexual feminism, using light, shadow reflection, fractals, embodiment, movement, and collaboration as her materials. Her intention is to create a spiritual network around the goal that aims to recalibrate the energy towards something positive and life-affirming. I want to take a moment to pause for this conversation and acknowledge the amazing work that's happening in the world with art, in agriculture, in the healing evolution that we're witnessing. As we dive into this conversation, I want to make room for the pauses that women are making in sports, in agriculture, in music, engineering, writing, and other fields. And I want to take time to acknowledge the people like these women that are leading and transforming how we will work and move towards an economy that is sustainable for us all. First, we will hear Navina. She will speak and give you more information about her work. Navina, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm inspired to be part of this curated group of amazing women together. As we get started, I just want to really acknowledge, as we talk about the art of healing, and for me talking about food and agriculture, that thinking about food, we know that it's our most intimate connection to our bodies and to our cultures and to land. And that for so many of us, particularly Black folks, Indigenous folks, and people of color from all over the world, that our relationship to land and to food has been shaped by forced migration, displacement, borders that have been drawn across our communities, including my own. I just want to acknowledge that that's the reality that we're in right now. And if we can go to the next slide, the second reality that I just want to really acknowledge for us as we're thinking about what we're what we're doing together is this pretty dooming picture that the International Panel on Climate Change has put out for us, basically saying that climate change is real, it's happening faster than any of us would have wanted it to, and then we basically have 9 years left not to stop climate change, it will happen regardless, but to stop living in the ways that we are and shape our economy in a radically different way so that there's at least some chance of survival of some species and humans. But that's where we are right now, and we're part of our healing process is acknowledging the grief and the fears around that too, that reality. When we look at the current picture of our food system, we can look at any of the news articles that come out or any of the crises that are happening, we know that the situation looks pretty bleak, right? Whether we look at food security or what's happening with workers in the food system or mass floods, we see crises all around us. And the pandemic of this last year has really made it so clear, you know, how much this is deeply entrenched in our societies and in so many ways. But the realities are, if we can go to the next slide, that the things are not actually, you know, getting worse. It's something that's been building for a really long time. And as Adrienne Maree Brown so succinctly put it, we must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil on what is happening in our society so that we can move forward and heal together. And in order to move forward, part of what that requires is us looking back. And many of you may be familiar with this image on the left side of my slide, the Sankofa image from the Ghana region, which basically says that in order to understand how to go forward, we have to look back. And so if we're to look back at how we got to where we are today, where we're in these mass crises, we can look back to what shaped our food system here in the US. On the next slide, we'll see that, you know, to be clear, it's over these last few hundred years, this food system that we have today has been shaped and was founded on the attempted genocide of indigenous peoples across this land. So many different groups of people who have lived here and who had thriving, sustainable food systems and economies. And their forced genocide and displacement, forced migration, as well as the forced migration of people who were kidnapped, primarily from Africa, to come to what is now the US and to work the fields, exploited for one small group of people to profit, right? For the colonies to profit. And the reality is that this is what's played out throughout history. So if we look to the next slide at just a really quick look through history, we can see that there's been this small group of people who were profiting, who established the United States, who have throughout history granted slices of power to folks across history, but that's clearly been holding power in the hands of a select few. And what we're in this work for is to build the collective power of all of us to be able to control our own lives, to have self-determination, and to have thriving communities. And I'm not going to take us through this whole history, but just to say that we can see along the way throughout these past 200 years and what we're living in today, that it's the same system of extraction and exploitation that shows up across our food system, and it shows up across our society in so many ways. So just to have one image of this, we can look to, in the next slide, that this same idea of extraction, rather than it just being extraction from indigenous folks and Black folks who were brought here as to be enslaved here, we're now exploiting and extracting from the land in so many other ways. And we can see that in so many different aspects of our food system, who is hurt, who benefits, and who doesn't. And if we go to the next slide, just real quick, we know that because of the small group of people that is making decisions for us right now, we have these ongoing policies that lead to mass incarceration and voter suppression and a continued extraction and exploitation of land and labor and life in so many different ways. That's what shapes our society. And what we've ended up with is this food and agriculture system that really puts power just in the hands of a select few. So just a real quick run through the next couple of slides. For example, 4 companies control 86% of the beef market. And we can look at any sector of the food system and say that same thing, whether we're looking at the grocery sector, it's 5 grocery companies that control that whole thing. We can see how much the vertical integration is impacting who actually gets to make decisions about what we have access to and what we don't in a corner store or in a grocery store or wherever. We know that we're being shut out of decision-making processes all the time. This next slide shows that it's actually an outdated slide, but even thinking about what actually gives us life, the seeds that sustain us, this is outdated. It's actually now down to 2 of these companies, Monsanto and Bayer, merged together and now control 63% of the seed industry. So over and over again, what we're seeing is this mass consolidation and concentration of power and this thing that feeds us and sustains us all in the hands, again, of just a select few folks who are holding power over us, that we are not able to make the decisions to change our own lives. So what does that mean for us? That means that we must defend what is sacred, right? We must defend our own lives, our own labor, our own land. If we can go to the next couple of slides, just briefly. For us at HEAL, what that meant for us is recognizing that we needed to come together. 4 organizations came together to co-found HEAL Food Alliance, the Food Chain Workers Alliance, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, Real Food Generation, and the Union of Concerned Scientists, saying that if we're going to defend the sacred, if we're going to defend our land and our labor and our lives, we need to come together and build something powerful in order to do that. And so we came together with a theory of change, basically saying that the select few that are putting profit over people and our planet, that's not going to work for us. That's a mythology. If we go to the next slide real quickly, people can just read this yourselves, but essentially saying that we know that the root causes of why our food system is the way that it is, values that over life. And we value life more. And we know that the change that we want is not currently politically possible, and that we need to change the conditions and structures. And that's going to take all of the art and the culture and everything else in order to get there. And that it's really going to take all of us as organizations, as whole people, bringing all of our diverse skills and resources to the table for us to make the scale of change that we need. And of course, we know that it's frontline communities that are the ones who know what are the solutions for themselves and need to be leading that change. So we've come together around all of this, and maybe when we get into the discussion, I don't want to take up too much more time, we can talk more about some of the ways that we do that work, but I know you're also going to hear from other brilliant folks who are leading some of that work in their own communities. So I'll turn it back to y'all.
Hi, my name is Sere Mokonnen, and I'll keep this short. I did do a talk with Milani a month ago or so, where I kind of go into my practice in depth with her. But yeah, Amanda, you can go to the next slide. Great. So my practice has evolved for many years, and in the last couple of years, since about 2018, which this image is actually from 2019, but the light sculptures from 2018, sorry. I started making light sculptures. And they're basically these totems, monuments, obelisks, whatever you want to call it, but they're memorials to Black women and those who self-identify as Black women and girls who died from state-sanctioned violence here in the US and while crossing the Mediterranean from East Africa, specifically Ethiopia and Eritrea, and across the Mediterranean into Europe. And if you see that there are these The faces on the light sculptures, it's a mirror acrylic that's laser cut, and what's laser cut out is Ethiopian Coptic crosses, which has been adopted by Coptic Christianity in Ethiopia, which only exists in Ethiopia and in Egypt. However, these designs and codes existed before Christianity came along. So they are indigenous to the region in East Africa, and you don't actually find these types of patterns kind of existing elsewhere. You find ones that look similar, but anyways, I'm drawn to them because I grew up around them, having been raised in an Ethiopian household. Also, I've always been interested in the fact that I knew that they existed before Christianity, and I, questioned what the meaning of them are. And, becoming an adult and doing research at the Smithsonian and other places, finding out that they're actually very feminine designs, and a lot of them are evoking the idea of rebirth, protection, and healing. So the idea is, if you wear these designs, if you carry them around with you, that they're protecting and healing you. And because these light sculptures that are these individual light boxes that are stacked up on top of each other, represent different Black women and girls here in the U.S. and across the Atlantic and Africa. I believe that each of these light boxes embodies their spirit, and the idea is that these patterns, you as the audience member, when you walk close by to them, you can see them in this image. They're projecting these patterns onto you, and are hopefully projecting protection and healing. And I'm specifically, my audience, the work is universal, but it is geared towards Black people and Black women specifically, as you can see here, because we are the mothers of all creation, and yet, oftentimes we're the most disrespected and, the ones who are left behind. So, and you can see here that the artists who are in this performance with me to activate the light sculpture are also wearing these Ethiopian scarves called netalas with the Amharic language, which is one dialect of in Ethiopia. There's many. There's up to 90, and I basically put prayers on there, things that people say to you when you are about to travel, whether you're traveling across a body of ocean or across the street. And it's just, things like come back home, be safe, be careful, take care of your soul and things like that. So we can go to the next image. So out of that light sculpture, since it's laser cut, the laser cut pieces, it's hollow. That's how you're able to get these shadows that project onto the walls and to people. Those laser cut out pieces are what you see on these textiles. So I have a series called the Astral Sea series. This is number 2. I've made 4 to date, and it's usually either on black fabric or blue fabric. And I get to further embody these Black women that I am honoring in my work. And I'm also I'm able to evoke their energies, their spirits through the performance. I find that performance, not only is it very ritualistic, but it's a very direct way to tap into energies. Whether or not you're spiritual, I think that anybody who is performing is a conduit, and you are asking for something to come through you, somebody. And in these performances, I'm deliberately asking for these women to come through me, and to basically cleanse these areas that I'm performing in front of. Here is Buckingham Palace. I performed in DC in front of the monument, in between the monument and the Capitol. I've also performed in front of the House of Parliament and the Churchill statue. I performed at the Venice Biennale in front of a boat that was put on display where up to 1,200 migrants died in, basically interrogating these oppressive forces, the oppressive force being white supremacy and patriarchy. And in these textiles, the movement that I'm doing, you have to see the video. I'm hitting the fabric over and over again, and I'm kind of washing the ground. And when I'm hitting the fabric, the mirrors are breaking. It looks very violent. It is a cathartic piece for me because there is a lot of anger that I'm channeling, but I'm also the idea is to also kind of spread a protective force and healing force for Black and Brown people in front of these oppressive powers that have created a lot of destruction all around the world, just like Navina was discussing in her PowerPoint. You can go to the next image. This is another Astral Sea piece. This is number 3. It, like I told you, it's blue. So the idea is that it's called Astral Sea because it is supposed to relate to or evoke the idea of water, bodies of water. I do a lot of research and work around connecting what's happening in the Black Mediterranean to what happened in the Black Atlantic. And that, the transatlantic slave trade is kind of being mirrored in this present moment across what's happening in the Mediterranean Sea, but also in the Caribbean. When you look at Haitian populations and other Black and Brown communities that are trying to make it across Western borders. And here you can really see the beauty of the piece, the reflective material. Again, reflection, light and shadows are really important in my work. I see them as like another medium that I'm working with. And also just to let you know, these patterns that I'm doing on the surfaces of these fabrics are abstracted Black designs, codes. So I've referenced the Congolese cosmograms. Sorry, that was for me to know when to stop talking. Congolese cosmograms, Haitian veves, Yoruba cosmology. Basically, these universal codes that pop up across all types of people around the world that are tapping into, their various forms of spirituality that they encode within these designs that migrate with their people that, we carry with us, even as a form of an evil eye. But again, I'm very much interested in the Black designs that are popping up across the diaspora. And I think I have one more image. Yes, so this is the one that I did in DC between the Capitol and the mall or the monument. This was actually during the BLM protests, kind of like peak COVID. And not knowing that the insurrection was going to happen in January, but this video or this performance, I did a collaboration with Cecily Alexa, who is a DC-based vocalist, and all of these videos you can find on my website or through Instagram, or just Google me. But yeah, I can end here.
Hello, my name is Samaria. It's an honor to be here today with these amazing women. Today, I'm going to talk about my work with the DC Mutual Aid Apothecary. I am a farmer and herbalist in DC, and my work centers around making herbal medicine and herbal education more accessible to the communities that I work in. I manage the farm at Kelly Miller in Northeast Washington, D.C., which is a 2-acre urban farm where we grow a variety of vegetables and fruit and medicinal herbs. And so the D.C. Herbal Mutual Aid Apothecary came out of this work at the farm, and it was a response to COVID. You can go to the next slide. And so in 2019, we started this project in an attempt to provide herbal medicine to communities and organizers in Washington, D.C. My co-founder, Malka, and I noticed that a lot of folks were suffering from a lot of anxiety due to COVID and all of the stress that was happening. And so we decided to put together a line of herbal products that focused on nervous system health, on lung health and just general well-being. And so you can go back to the other slide. So it really started out with working with volunteers at the farm to make herbal medicine and receiving donations from other herbalists, gardeners, and farmers in DC who provided us with the herbs. And we would do medicine making sessions on the farm to make the different products, and then would be in contact with organizers like BLM DC and DC IWOC to distribute the products that we were making, and also host community pop-ups at the farm and at other places in the city so that we could provide this herbal medicine. And so after last year, we took the winter time to really regroup and reflect on the work that we were doing, and to figure out a way to make it more open and bring in more community to the work that we were doing. And so the idea was to open it up to other herbalists and other herbal enthusiasts in the DMV region, to bring them in a variety of different things, and also to provide more targeted programming for communities so that we could make more herbal medicine and be more coordinated in our efforts. And so the way that it's structured right now, you can go to the next slide, is that we provide programming at the farm at Kelly Miller every Friday between 3 and 6 p.m. And so every first Friday is Farm Days. It's an opportunity for folks who are interested in learning about growing their own herbal medicine, harvesting it, processing it, taking care of it, to come to the farm, help plant our herbs and take care of them, and really get hands-on experience growing the herbs. You can go to the next slide. And then the next Friday is a class. And so we are lucky in DC. There are amazing clinical herbalists and educators in DC who've been teaching for a really long time. And so we're lucky to be able to have those folks come to the farm every second Friday to provide free herbalism classes. And so our first class is actually this upcoming Friday with clinical herbalist Holly Poole-Cabana, and they will be doing an herbal energetics plant walk. And again, these classes are free. We really want to make sure that this information is open and accessible to the communities that we work with. Next slide. And then our third Friday of the month is our medicine making sessions. And so we started out in May working with a small group of volunteers who we are training to make this herbal medicine. And we realized last year that we were holding a lot of the knowledge of how to make our products. We make herbal glycerites, which are basically like a non-alcoholic version of the tincture. We do dried teas and steams, and a solve. And so we really wanted to be able to train more people so that more folks knew how to make this herbal medicine, so that we weren't just holding all of the knowledge. And so we do these medicine making sessions. It's an opportunity for folks who are interested to come out and help and really gain hands-on experience of how to make these herbal products. Next slide. And then the last Friday of the month is our community pop-up. So we hosted our first community pop-up, I believe on the 28th. And we were able to provide people with herbal products, so our glycerites and our solve, with dried bulk herbs, with fresh herbs, and medicinal plants. And so we were really lucky. We are growing a really, I think, strong network of people who are interested in being a part of this work. There are a lot of wonderful farmers and herbalists in DC who have contributed to this project last year and are interested in continuing to support us this year. And so we're able to, work with these farmers. They donate plants to us, plant material, dried herbs, and then that way we're able to provide those things to communities and organizers. You can go to the next slide. And so as I mentioned, we are cultivating this farmer herbalist network, and Another aspect of this herbalist network is bringing in clinical herbalists to attend our community pop-ups, so that if there are people who come to them who would like a consultation, they can meet with these herbalists, get recommendations from them, and then potentially come and use the herbal products that we have available for them. And so this is really kind of new, a new iteration for us this year. But the vision is really to create a strong community for herbalists in the DC area, specifically BIPOC herbalists. We know that there's a lot of interest in herbalism, and so we want to provide a space for people who are studying herbalism to be able to gain hands-on experience doing work in community. And then we also want to be able to provide herbal medicine free of cost to people in need. The communities that we're in, that we work in, there's very limited access to healthy food, to quality healthcare. And so we see all of these health disparities in the populations that we work with. And so being able to provide support for people's nervous system, for their lung health, for their general well-being, hopefully will kind of awaken in folks who are using this medicine a connection to this ancestral legacy and ancestral heritage. We know that people of color have been working with plants for many, many, many years, and that we've been disconnected from this lineage. And so we really want to work to reconnect our communities to this legacy and to this lineage, because I think it's something that is really innate within us. And so we hope to be able to continue to grow this work and reach more people this year. And so if you're interested in volunteering with us, you can go to the next slide. Or coming to any of our pop-ups, you can find us at the DC Mutual Aid Apothecary on Instagram. Thank you.
Bring everybody back for a conversation. Ladies, thank you so much for your presentations. My first question, or what I would first want to bring to the table, is one of the reasons that I was so intrigued with with your work is that it reminded me of a quote from Zora Neale Hurston. And Zora Neale Hurston, she has this quote that says, "There are years that ask questions and years that answer." And I feel like all three of you, the three of you, are doing work that asks questions, and it also provides answers. Samaria talked about how the work that working with the community and saying, oh, we're holding on to the knowledge, right? And so it asked a question of like, okay, well, what do we do? So how do we answer it? I'd like to hear you all talk about what are some of the big questions that your work is asking you and some of the answers that you have found inside of it.
I guess I can start. I think something that I think about a lot is just like, how do we find healing within our communities? And how do we make these different modalities more accessible to people? In like my personal journey of healing, I've really come to see it as something very like circular, something that takes a lot of time. But I think that being able to provide support for people, as they're on this circular healing journey is really important. And I think, for a long time, it felt like, I personally had this interest in herbalism, but like, does anyone else, like, are there other people? Is there a community out there? And so I think the more and more we can come together and be in community, we can see other people's healing journeys and find commonalities in them and find ways to heal in community together.
Thank you.
I think for me, my work, I will say performance art has done this for me, and then performing specifically with other Black women who are just as bold and experimental as I am. That I think the work for me has challenged myself to like push the boundaries, be challenging, not give a shit about anybody's rules, not respect authority, which I mean, is something that I've always had, but I know that through my practice and through my art, through my collaborations, I've grown way more comfortable with that. And in that, I've seen that it's also given others permission, which I actually didn't know that my work would do that until I started seeing it. Because really, I initially started to explore being, like abstract forms of performance art and using these different mediums to express the different things that I was experiencing and researching, and also seeing in my community. So directly that, yeah, I think that my biggest takeaway has been really seeing like this level of comfort that me and other women that I'm around, like in showing up in these spaces, inserting ourselves and and claiming that space as our own. And then what that does to the audience that happens to be around, it gives them that permission as well. Yeah, so I think that, and there's a level of care in that, like there's a lot of care in being able to like show up and like have your cellulite be out there and not give a fuck. There's a lot of care in looking weird or crazy or whatever in front of a group of people, because it's telling other people that they can do the same. You could just show up as you are. So I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you asked that question, I thought of two things that are kind of on different ends of the spectrum. One of them is just like the real linear, like how do we break up the power that corporations have, right? That's like the one end of it. But the other one that really like is very much like in my heart and present for me as somebody who wants to be more land-based and who sees a lot of the healing journey as being able to shift our relationship to land. It's how do we do that in the structures that we live in, right? Where we know that we're all on occupied Indigenous land. We know that we're living in this really jacked up system of private property ownership. I live in Oakland, where accessing affordable land is just impossible. Anywhere that is affordable, it's like Confederate flags everywhere, and like still like MAGA signs everywhere. So like, where is it safe for somebody who is a person of color to be, and how do we create those safe spaces and shift those relationships in ways that that are healing and transformative for all of us? I feel like, the work that Samaria is talking about and creating that kind of space for people to come and like develop that connection, like that's the kind of safe space that makes it possible for us to imagine something more. And then how do we actually access that, in our communities and make more and more space for it?
It seems also that one thing that the recent times have brought us, and just the opportunity I think that women are really learning and collectively doing more of, is taking up more space, demanding that we have the time to do what we need to do, say what we need to say, think what we need to think. When you were talking today about your work giving other people permission to do the same, how did that then show up in your practice and the things that you begin to do? Like, how did you, seeing how your work, and this is for everyone, you seeing how your work, the surprising effects of the healing and things you didn't expect, how did that then bring it back to you, like Samaria was saying, that circular nature of healing? How did your work come back to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one simple, like, tangible thing that I can say is that, like, I have way more, my self-worth has grown exponentially. My self-worth, my self-confidence. understanding that even if I am in like an unsafe space, I can still hold my ground. And I know that nobody can take like that inner worth or that inner self, no one can take that away. Right. So, and also understanding too that like a lot of times, you know, in these spaces, and to be frank, most of these spaces are white, or classist. That, you know, it may not just be a racist setting; it could be a classist setting. That a lot of times people are projecting onto you, right? So, I mean, here's a perfect example. That just happened like a week ago. Ayana Evans, who's one of my longtime collaborators, another phenomenal Black woman artist. We had a residency in Passaic Projects, which is in upstate New York, where I'm at right now. And just across, like 15 minutes away, 40 minutes away in Torrington, Connecticut, we did several performances outside. That's one of our things, is like we do individually and together, we do these public performances outside that puts you in very vulnerable situations, you know? And I will say, through practice, you do get to read the room as far as like the energy. You kind of learn like, maybe not here, you know, or you might, you know, I have an idea coming into it, and then I'll have to revise it in the moment, because I'm like, this crowd is not going to respond well, or I might be putting myself in a position of like, you know, unsafety and stuff. But I will say that because I've been doing it for so many years, and I have been putting myself in spaces that are very unsafe, I kind of have this boldness now where I don't give a fuck, to be frank. And but anyways, in Torrington, Connecticut, we were doing a performance in front of a theater that's been closed during the entire pandemic. Pretty much all the businesses on that street have been closed. And the board of the theater called the guy who was organizing it the night before, freaking out because he saw our image. It's this iconic image of us in Martha's Vineyard in a market. We're wearing fishnets and, you know, bathing suits. And I have an Ethiopian kapa, which is like a royal cape. Ayana has like her cat suit on. Anyways, we are not nude. I mean, like, yes, the image is very like bold. But basically this board was like, oh my God, like, what are they gonna do? They're so obscene. And the theater is across the street from a children's museum. Mind you, it's been shut down for the entire pandemic. There is nobody in that children's museum. And we're like, what do they think that we're gonna do? And it was so clear that they were so threatened by these two Black women who are sitting in their power in this image. You know, we look very powerful. We look very regal. And yes, you can see my skin. I mean, like, you know, God forbid you see my Black skin, you know, like, and then on top of the fact that, I mean, you know, we already know that women's bodies are policed, especially when you're shapely. Both Ayana and I are very thick. You know, we got curves. I don't know what they thought what was going to happen, but it was just one of those moments of just like, wow, like, it's, you know, we are professional artists. You know, we know when to do things and when not to do them. What we did in front of the theater, everybody loved it and enjoyed it. People said that was the best thing they've seen ever in Torrington. And it was just so interesting that these like super white conservative people on the board, you know, were terrified. But all that to say, yeah, I think that what my work has done for me, and I think what I hope it does for other women, especially Black and brown women, and those, again, like I said, femmes, so anybody who self-identifies as women, or who are, you know, who are non-binary, is that like all the spaces you're in it's damn near impossible to find a safe space, like, you know, where we're at in this world, right? But that you can, like what these women on this panel are doing, it's like you can kind of create those safe spaces, but as well as like, even if unfortunately most places you're going to interact with are not safe, and it's like you can still show up as yourself, even if it's, you know, you holding on to that little bit of yourself that that nobody has access to, or you're loud and aggressive about it, you know, like there's nothing wrong with that. So I think that's where I'm at, you know. Yeah, which, I mean, it goes back to what you were saying about Naomi Osaka. Like, it's moments like that I can really appreciate, and I can see as like a collective that we're moving towards, where it's like we're speaking up more, we're demanding more. You know, I'm in a space now where like I'm tired of how the art industry specifically is so violent towards artists, and not only just artists, but arts admin, and you know, and anybody in the sector. And it's because there's such a lack of care, and it's like that shit is done. It's tired. It's like, you know, like we have to figure out another way to operate. Yeah.
Well, I'm enthralled by how, you know, you all have created these spaces of care that you have control over the environment of how that's safe. And so as we look into how that healing has like come, the work has come back to you, and how it heals other women, it also has given examples that says, okay, you know, you're taught this one path of how to go about your life, and you have this myth of safety, but you look at women who then step outside of it and actually are able to create safer spaces for themselves in a wide variety of ways. Did anyone else want to comment on with the healing, how the healing has come back to you?
Yeah, I was just going to add, after we did the first pop-up, it was like a great day. It was supposed to rain all day, and the rain just like held off literally until 7 o'clock, and then it just like poured. But we were done. And so I got home, and I had like worked late 2 days in a row, and I have 3 kids, and I was like, and I had to like make more medicine. And I was like, I could either like just keep going, or I can just stop and take care of myself. Like I spent this day like sharing medicine with other people to help take care of other people. So like now I'm going to take care of myself. And I just like took a hot bath, and I did yoga, and I stretched, and I slept. And I think like I'm passionate about this work, so I can work a lot. And just like pour everything into it. And so I'm really at a place where I'm like, I have to take care of myself. I need to slow down so that I can continue to do this and enjoy this, but like really prioritize my own self-care as I do this work.
Yeah, everything that both of y'all are saying is really resonating with me. And maybe just the thing that I'll add is that, you know, as we are really passionate about our work, right? So end up doing too much all the time. And that's a process of like decolonizing ourselves too, right? And like letting go of some of those internal ideas of how much we need to do, or how much we need to drive something, you know, forward. And that, you know, so many of us show up with that. So it's like to be the one that holds the container is also, it's a lot of work to do that all the time. So like figuring out, it's like the ongoing question, right? Of like, how do we figure out, like, the thing we want is liberation and imagination. So how do we like also make that part of how we live, not just create that space, you know, for other folks. And I'll just say that it's like really affirming when I see other folks and I'm able to like give them that feedback that they did that for me. So thank you both, Sudey and Samaria, for doing that for me. And to, you know, build that culture with each other, that we're in support. Because what we're here for is something so radically different than any of us have ever been able to experience, given the systems that we live in.
When we did started Reclamation, it, you know, really was an opportunity for us to look at the art that takes care of the artists. Like, what are the spaces? How are artists taking care of themselves in their own home spaces? And a lot of times the women who are, like you said, doing so much and pushing so hard because we know there's so much to do. And I've been thinking about an equation that's like, okay, I could push really hard and maybe have 10 years to actually do the work, or I could pace myself and maybe make it to like 100 and actually be old enough to make sure that this wisdom is passed down. Because I wonder if people have pushed themselves so hard that they did a lot of great work in a short period of time, but either the system kills them, or they are killed under the system, and then it's almost like we have to start again, you know. And so what are the strategies that you use? Because we could always talk about, you know, it's easy to like run down the amazing things that you all are doing and how you're doing and putting out and putting out and putting out, but we're talking to an audience who needs to put in, who needs to sometimes slow down and sometimes make that a longer pace. So are there any strategies that you have that resonate in your own art of healing?
I mean, I think for me, one of the big things is just remembering that none of us does do this alone, and that, you know, what I want is collective leadership, and for us to be in community and collaboration with each other. And it's not always easy when you're in a position of leadership to like be vulnerable in that way and like really figure out how to make that happen. But you know, having a circle of other brilliant women of color to be in community with and to bounce ideas with, or just like, you know, go for a hike with, or kick back and have a beer with, or whatever, is so much a part of that healing process, because we're all in this struggle in different ways. And, you know, other folks have said it really well, that just the need for us to have those leaderful movements, so that it's not up to any one of us to show up all the time for everything, but that we can trust each other enough to, you know, someone else will show up if we're not there sometimes, and that's okay. And giving each other and ourselves the permission and the grace to do that.
Well, one thing that I've done, two things I've done this year. I think I started doing it this year. Maybe it started last year, but you know, the pandemic, everything is one block. But I have what is it, like an email response? So when people email me, there's a response that is basically like saying like, I'll either list all the things that I'm doing, or it'll be a short, like, I'm not as available as I usually am until August. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Here's like my assistant's email or something like that. But having an email response is really, it's more so for me than for the person who receives it, because it allows me to know that like, I don't have to respond like right away, where I've had that pressure for the last 10 years, especially like being a full-time artist. I'm just like, I need to get back to you. It's like 2 a.m. and I'm like, and I have burnt myself out every single year. And that's part of it. So that's one thing. Another thing I've done is I hired an assistant. And it's, thank you, right? That was huge. So, I put out a call on Instagram and I got mad responses, which I was shocked. Like people had shared it and stuff. It was really cool and really affirming too, that like my community like really looks out for me. And I attracted like an amazing woman who, like, she's not young. She just happens to be in between degrees before she gets her PhD. So she's like a grown ass woman, like with her own, like, she's super responsible and has worked in the arts administration realm for years. So like, she's perfect because I didn't have to like hold her hand and stuff. Also, I know that is like, it can be a financial burden because it's something that I've never been able to do until recently. But I will say that like, when I decided to do it, it wasn't because I had the money. It was because I was like on my knees. Like I was like, I need help. Like my career is expanding, which is awesome, but like I'm burning out like constantly, and I didn't have time to like take care of myself, take care of my son, even be in community with other people. So those are the 2 things that I did. Even if you can't do that, I would say try to find an intern, like somebody who could take over your social media account, as something as simple as that. Or, this is if you work for yourself, or I don't know, make promo material for you. This is me thinking as an artist, but any little way that somebody else can take something from you. And, and if you can't pay them, maybe you can barter with them, or you can offer them mentorship or something. So those are my like 2 direct ways that I've been, aside from like taking naps more often, not as regularly as I want, but I am incorporating that now, the nap ministry and all that. And using herbs. I'm a fiend for like tinctures and teas and all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I'll say I've gone to the beach the past 3 weekends and like just, with my kids, with my
Nice.
partner,
Mhm.
just to like be by the water and relax and like sit, drink a beer, like hang out with my mom. And that's been really nice. And then I'm also trying to like do more art, make more music. And I find that like that really like de-stresses me in a way that I think I really forgot because I've been like doing this ag work for so long. And then, the co-founder of the Mutual Aid Apothecary, like we have a really great like working relationship where I feel like we kind of know what each of us are good at and we're really able to like divvy up the work. And that is like super helpful in being able to do this. And like she's out of town now, for like the next 3 weeks, and I'm holding it down. And then I'm going out of town for 3 weeks and she's holding it down. And so I just like appreciate that we can have that balance. And then it doesn't make it like such a difficult thing because we're really working well together and supporting each other through this work that we're doing.
I love to see how we're um, creating cooperatives in our own lives in a way. So it's almost like we take the work that we have and then create a model that's more shared. I'm loving how that's looking on women and what I'm seeing in my friends as they do this and find other modes of working and that are saying, you know what, maybe instead of getting this, I will get some help. Maybe instead of buying that, I will employ another person to assist or to help. And moving from that space that says, oh, I have to do everything, especially when we're, in fields where we're already doing every single thing. And I'm so glad you brought up the work of Trisha Hersey as a part of the NAP ministry, because when I look at her work and I look at Naomi Osaka, I say there's such similarities in their responses. So sometimes, in the society, we do have to like almost have to like be bigger, be louder, be, it's so out with the ways that we have to express. But there's also in the quiet moment of a nap or just refusing, just simply refusing. I will not be there. I will not do. And just the power that both sides of that spectrum and everything in between is pushing, and how that's pushing the ways that we're doing things. And Navina, when I look at your work as far as like sustainability, I wonder how, how does this gig culture, well, not a gig culture, this traditional work culture that puts someone way at the top and the people at the bottom, how does that show up and affect the ecology of the planet and the sustainability of what the work we need to get together in the next 9 years, you say? How is that showing up in your work?
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Like what we have agreed to as a society, like as we've agreed that white supremacy and capitalism and this very patriarchal and heteronormative systems that say that some people's time is worth more than other people's time. That's what we've ascribed to, right? As a society. And we're saying like, for example, we'll say that it's, we just like can't find people to work the fields, or we can't find people to work meat processing plants. The reality is we're not valuing that labor as much as we value other labor, right? So I think fundamentally what we all, need to take a hard look at is like, what can we actually value each other enough to value everyone's time, and everyone's lives and everyone's need to take care of their families and all of that. For us as an organization in practice, what we try to do then is, set really clear boundaries around when people are expected or not expected to work, because we could all be working all the time, doing those emails at 2 a.m. and I'm, the classic person who like still does that. I'm trying not to do that and still does that. but really trying to, find that balance of how can people bring their whole selves to work and share, like, here are the things that are stressing me out outside of work right now. And I might need a little bit of extra time to just take care of myself and my family a little bit right now, but still be able to show up, when you show up. Try to be really clear around not having huge disparities in how much folks get paid or how much folks are expected to work, and valuing the contributions that everyone is making to the work. And we all come with an ingrained sense of what hierarchies are supposed to be and things like that. So it's a work of again, just like decolonizing that from ourselves together too.
I love how you shift the narrative, because there is this conversation of like, oh, we can't find people to do the work, right? Or that we can't find people who will take this job. I was reading a report that was saying there's so many jobs that are available that as people are being pushed to go back to work, and a lot of people are not taking them. And I was listening to the Karen Hunter show, and she was, her host, Drew McCaskill, was talking to Mayor Lumumba, and he was saying, well, these kind of movements where people are saying, you know what, it's not that I don't want to work, it's just that I refuse to exchange my dignity.
That's right.
For work, right? And so I refuse to compromise myself and for that has no gain, right? And people are saying, you know what, I don't have to do this. And I think we learned a lot about that in this great pandemic, or the great pause. And so I wanted to talk about that. Mayor Lumumba had this term called the dignity economy. And I was like, wow, I love how that sounds, And so what are the things that we can do in our own lives? And what are some suggestions that you may have for other people to push the world to a dignity economy?
Well, can I just push a little bit before we go to that question?
Yeah.
I think it's a really good question. And just to say that we did and we didn't take that pause during this pandemic, right? We said, oh, these workers are essential. But what we really meant in a lot of those cases is that in order for us to keep the economy functioning the way that it has,
Thank you.
in order for all consumers to have access to everything that they've always had access to, these people need to keep working in the ways that they have. And we didn't take the pause for thousands of folks who are essential workers and who had, way higher risk of, getting COVID and weren't able to take care of their families and were getting really crappy wages and still can't take a paid sick day, to even get a vaccine. That's still the reality for so many folks. We had so many hopes, around what we would learn from this pandemic and how we would come back in a really different way. And we haven't done that yet.
I'm so glad that you brought that forward, because that's so true. Because as people talk about it or define it as a great pause, and for people who are listening can't hear my quotation marks around it, it really allowed us to look and say, okay, we can say people are essential, but not necessarily treat them as valuable. And I think that became front row and center. And then it's like, okay, so people who had the opportunity to maybe work from home, or who had the opportunity to shift in other spaces, were beginning to say, okay, what can I do in my day-to-day life that changes how other people who don't have this access to this opportunity able to show up? And what are the things, like what does a dignity economy look like, or pushing this world into a dignity economy? What does that look like in some of our day-to-day actions?
Well, I can say a few things just about like workers in this economy and essential workers, which just like one plug for folks who are listening is that we still don't have an emergency temporary standard, which is what OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, should have issued at the very beginning of pandemic for folks to have extra protections from a respiratory illness. We're now 15 months into pandemic, and it's not over, and we still don't have that standard in place, right? So that means that people in their workplaces, essential workers who have been at work this whole time, still don't have, basic equipment. They don't have sufficient distancing. They don't have the right to speak out And when we think about just like dignity at its most fundamental, people shouldn't have to choose between their lives and their livelihoods, right? Like basic. People shouldn't have to make that choice. And that's what they've been forced to do. And I think, hopefully our other speakers will take us into like more, thinking about ways that like we can show up for that in our own lives. I just really want folks to be aware that that's still the case for hundreds of thousands of workers or millions of people who are working in our food system, especially right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like working in agriculture, there was no pause last year. It just like all the work, it really intensified. And I think it took me personally a while to like get myself out of this mindset that like, because I was doing this work, I had to work so much. And it really took a whole like year and like having the winter time to be like, no, like I can slow down. Like I can get myself out of this like kind of panic mindset. And it really took a while for my body to just like really release that and let that go. Because at first it was like, yeah, we're essential, like, and then it felt like, no, like this isn't right. Like the amount that people are working, especially in the food system, isn't right. And like we deserve to take time off and like not have to continue to work just because we produce food for people. And I think especially like as a parent, it's been a struggle to just like juggle, like kids haven't been in school for a year, but like we still all have to work and are still like required to show up and like go this extra distance. And so I just think like, I want a shorter work week, like I want to work 3 days a week. And I don't know what else, but I just think like a lot needs to change. I think school needs to change. I've seen the stress of being online for my kids and the requirement to continue to like uphold this standard while being at home isolated from all of these people. And I think it's been really hard on kids in a way that like, I don't know, we're always even recognizing as adults. And so I think the way that we do schooling needs to change. I think the way that we do everything needs to change. And that this is just like the beginning of us like really recognizing that and pushing. And I see a lot of people pushing and I really appreciate that. But I think we have a long way to go to really like unravel this system that we're all just like entangled within. And yeah, I think just, more rest, more vacations, like better wages for people. Like, and I think if we can like spend all of this money on like war, like all of these things that we spend all of this money on, like, why can't we spend money for people to have housing and to have good wages and to not have to work all the time? I saw this article about this woman. I saw this article about how all of these people have gone undiagnosed for cancer in the pandemic, and about this woman who like worked in like a candy factory, and she just kept working, even as like her breast cancer just got like worse and worse and worse to the point where then like she couldn't work at all. And I just think like it's heartbreaking and very unfair that people have to push themselves and continue to work to support their family when they really need to take care of themselves. And so I just think a lot really needs to change.
And, just to like jump in on, I agree with everything that you just said, and to jump in and add to your point of, as an agricultural worker, thinking that you needed to keep working this whole time because people need to eat, which is true, right? But like, why are we depending on 21.5 million people to work our food system instead of all of us being involved to some degree in making sure that there's enough food in our communities and that we're we're valuing that because we all do need to eat every day. Like in an ideal, in a dignified economy, everyone would be doing, some manual labor and some creative labor and really feel purposeful in what they're doing. Not that they have to do this one thing that fits in this one box, right? I'll stop talking so other people can talk.
No, you're fine. Yeah.
I don't have that much to add other than both of y'all said everything that I want to say. And for myself, and I could speak for a bunch of my colleagues, like in the art world, when the pandemic hit, like we all got 20 times more busier, which was wild because it's like we're in our homes. Like how has it become more demanding? And yeah, it got really frustrating because what ended up happening was like all of these institutions were demanding more content. That's why I started doing the email responses, because it was insane. Like I would get to go to my inbox and all of these emails that I'd have to like respond to, and even like these different institutions I was working with. There's one currently that I'm actually working with. It I will not call them out right now because I've already sent them a piece of my mind. Mm-hmm. But like you sign a contract, you got your check or in an agreement of what you're supposed to do, but then all of a sudden there's like all these other things that they're asking you to do. And I noticed that increased a lot during the pandemic. Like previous to the pandemic, that was just not the case. It was like you do your show, you have a talk, maybe you have a performance, that's it. But like, yeah. So this one institution that I'm dealing with, who, again, this is like, directly related to capitalism and how this country works. But like, artists are, a lot of times when it comes to the art world, we're at the very bottom of the pyramid, which makes no sense because there would be no art world without the artists, right? Mm-hmm. And this institution is giving out money to these artists, and including myself, and it was kind of like this, the idea that like you should be grateful that we're giving you this money, even though the money didn't cover half the shit that I had to do for them, Mm-hmm. And I'm really at a point where like, kind of like what Samira was saying, is like by winter, like the end of 2020 going into 2021, it really hit me where I was like, this makes no sense. Like this is not sustainable. Milani, what you're saying, like, I don't want to just bust my ass for 10 years and then fall apart after that 10th year, or God forbid die because I didn't take care of myself. I'm in it for the marathon. Like I want to be able to live a long life. Like I have a child, I have another child coming, like I have family and friends. I personally just want to be around to see how things pan out. You know what I mean? And I want to celebrate the fruits of my labor. And it's like, I've really come to understand that, like, yeah, these industries that we're all operating under do not give a shit about us. And, and maybe, until things shift, like we have to come to a place where it's like, we rely more on each other than on all of these institutions or companies, whatever you're working for, like that pay you. I get it. We need money. I'm not naive to that at all. That's why I bust my ass half the time, because I'm stressing over paying bills and paying rent and making sure my, everything is covered for my son, let alone myself. And I don't know. Yeah. Pandemic has opened my eyes to just be like, you know what? I need to step away from this like hamster wheel. 'Cause no matter, like, all of these successes, great. All these career wins, amazing. Sure, I've got these accolades, I've won these prizes and all this stuff, but like, what does it matter at the end of the day? Like, if I can't even enjoy them because I'm burnt out, I'm exhausted, I haven't had any quality time with my son, and we're in the same apartment all the time because he's also at home, like doing schoolwork. And I'm like, I've barely spoken to this child because I've been on the phone and emailing, and yeah. Anyways, I'm going on a rant, so I feel y'all.
Yeah, I want to just say that the rants are okay. The taking of time is okay. The taking of space, the taking more moments to get to whatever you have to say is fine. I think a lot of times we have these conversations under an expectation that it will like lead to some sort of result or lead to, and that we kind of, you know, are looking for sound bites, which is like, no, this is not we don't have soundbite solutions. So I just really appreciate you all's willingness to, you know, take the time that we need. And also when we do get to the point that we end the conversation, for us to feel okay that it doesn't have to end with oh, the sound perfect, this is what it looks like next, because these are big problems. These are big, 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 big problems. And we're big and brilliant dealing with it, but we still have a lot of questions. So thank you for the ramble. It all gets us to where we need to be. And I think that's something that we are, as an arts administrator, I think that it's important to force the space for that and people to be okay with it. That made me lose my next question. Not that but which is fine. I wanted to also, in listening to this conversation, I love what you said today about the where the artist is inside of an industry, but it also is the same conversation that to me Samaria and Navina are having, right? As far as like, you have these whole industries that are based on the labor and based on the participation of the person who is least value in it. And I find that fascinating. Like I don't know, and I also wonder how many people don't experience their brilliance in arts, in farming, in food agriculture, in community activism, in healing, in spiritual work, because they say, if I enter at the point where my brilliance is, I know there's a level of dehumanization that could come with it, you know? And so I don't even know if I have a question about that, but it's as we look at it and we see it, it's like, what do we do? Do we have to, you know, is it just to first observe it, to really understand it? But like, what do you see there, or what can we do?
I don't know if this is gonna answer the question, but I had this thought of, I can't remember who I was talking to about this, but I've been studying more of somatics and like somatic healing, and the idea that all of this ancestral stuff is within our DNA. And someone was just saying that like it's in our DNA to like work ourselves to death, you know, just because of what has happened to our ancestors. Like that is ingrained within us. And yeah, I've been thinking about that and thinking a lot about how to like work with the body and like work with somatics to like unwind the nervous system and like unwind this like fight or flight mode that I think a lot of us are stuck in because we're in this system and we don't even realize that we're there, you know, maybe even till it's too late. So that's just a thought that I had as from that other question.
This is actually, I feel like, a question, because I don't know what the answer is, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot and talking to close colleagues of mine or peers. I know one thing that's frustrating, you know, within the art world that happens often is, you know, I may stand my ground and say no to something, right? Because I'm like, no, I'm not going to do this thing for your $150 honorarium that's going to require like 20 hours of labor or something. Where, you know, it ends up being like I'm making $1 an hour. Like, no, right. I'm not going to do that, right? Although there was a period where I would say yes when I was younger, when I was being told I'm an emerging artist, which that kind of goes back to like what you were saying, Milani, right before this. But it's, you know, it's this lack of self-worth that a lot of us are like, it's projected onto us, especially in these, well, in the systems of hierarchies, right? Because it's like, well, you're just coming up, so you should take all the shit. You have no right to stand up for yourself. You have no right to demand more. basically like you're an indentured servant for us, whatever institution it is that you're working for. But the point I'm getting to now that is frustrating is that I know that I can say no to these things, and I'll even be vocal a lot of the time, which has gotten me into trouble, and probably blacklisted me at this point in some circles, where I'll say no to that honorarium or no to that stipend or no to that opportunity. Like, fuck your exposure. I don't need that. Like, I need money because that's what I need in living in this capitalistic society. But there's always going to be somebody. The reason why the art world does not care is like there's always somebody that will take that opportunity, and that's what's been frustrating to kind of realize, is that like this is not going to change. At least it feels like to me, because there's always somebody who's willing to say yes when because we're so replaceable, and that's kind of how the art world and many of these industries work. So I don't know how to address that, where it's like this collective, like, I just wish that we all would come together and have an understanding, like, we're not going to take this shit anymore together. But we're not there yet. So, yeah.
And that's why I think it's so important to have this conversation, like, across fields, from like arts to agriculture, because we do need money, but really we need sustainability, and sustainability connects to food, right? And so we have this crazy system where we have to say yes to things because we're not set up in a way to say, yes in certain, we have to buy food from someone. We have to get our basic needs fulfilled by someone else, right? And not even just in a community level. And I'm like, well, what would happen if communities were set up in a way that, as Samari was saying, where we all, and I think the video you had alluded to it as well, where we all participated in what the community basically needs. Mm-hmm. And so once everybody has some of their basic needs met, then your whole relationship seems like it could change, with money. And I'm like, so I'm like, and I don't, like I said, I don't have the answers, but I'm wondering, what is the answer? Like, what is the opportunity between arts and agriculture? Or agriculture and these as many other fields that can say we can shift a whole relationship with finances if we work together to shift our relationship with our basic needs. And I don't know what that means or what that leads to, but that is one of the reasons that I wanted to have this conversation as well.
Yeah. I mean, we need art and we need agriculture. There's many other things too. We need both of those things for sure. And I feel like what you're naming without naming is that we're like stuck in this individualistic, competitive way of being, right? Where we always think that it's like we have to get ahead somehow, as if there actually is any ahead. Like, it reminds me of that children's book about remember that one about the caterpillars that are like just climbing on top of each other and on top of each other and on top of each other. And one caterpillar finally gets to the top and it's like, I'm just at the top of a pile of caterpillars. Like, there's nothing else there. But that's so much of what capitalism is, right? It's telling us that like, we have to make it on our own. You can't trust anyone else. And, it's like the power of people coming together and like going on strike in whatever ways, but people have to really not cross the picket line. Like, can you organize all artists to like not cross the picket line, right? They will not say yes to those gigs that don't value their worth, right? You've spent years and years and years like perfecting your art, just like all of us, right? We spent years and years and years getting to the place where we can do a 5-minute talk or a 10-minute talk or whatever, right? So yeah, it's the existential question, like, how do we all get to the place where we value ourselves and each other enough to choose that instead?
Thank you.
Hope for the Flowers. That's the name of that book.
It's called what?
Hope for the Flowers.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I always just wonder, is there a day when we would be organized enough for everyone to just not go to work? Just say no. And like, what would that look like? And, what would happen? And then I also think of like, what what were things like before capitalism? Like, how did people exist? We know people existed before this, and so how do we look back and look back to the ways that people were in community and took care of each other and had their needs met, and like bring that forward into the future with us. And then I also thought, as an artist, as a musician, I remember those days when I would just do free shows because, like, I'm new. Like, I want to get my name out there. I was young, in my early 20s. I had the energy, and then I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. It's not sustainable. And I think, we're in a culture where it's just like you have to like hustle and grind to get yourself out there. And so we're not even thinking about our own care or how that's impacting other people or other artists who are, wanting better wages. And I think we really have to just shift that idea of like that hustle grind culture that is a big part of art. And like the artists that I came up with, there was this idea of 10,000 hours of like, just like practice all the time. But like, is that sustainable? I don't think it is. So yeah, we really have to like shift our perceptions of art and culture and work.
Well, like I said, we wouldn't end this conversation with any like solid, sound biteable, we can put it on Instagram answer. But I do believe that anyone who takes the time to listen to what we've said here and make some of the connections, that it will lead to more questions, that will lead to more answers. I really want to thank you all for participating in. We are, pushing how we can show up in art spaces and what art spaces can be, what museums can be, what conversations can happen in these spaces. So it's often when you're making changes, there are risks that come with those changes. So thank you for participating in the risk and participating in the adventure of how we do things differently. And I hope that you all find ways to stay in contact and maybe find connections in your work and call each other, when you see that there could be a connection, if that's something that works for you. Definitely keep us posted, keep me posted about your work. I would love to brag about you. We would love to tell people as much as we can. And anybody who, knows that once we start bragging, we keep bragging about you. So please keep us posted. And thank you all for this. And I don't want to take any more of your time, so I am going to say goodnight and thank you all for this conversation.
Thanks so much, Milani, and all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.